What's the difference between a Beyonce concert and Bernie Sanders? They both sold out. Good to see all of you here. Welcome to the Jaybefaunt channel. I am your host, James Fauntleroy. Welcome to all of you for joining in with me today. Just to let you guys know, the Jaybefaunt channel is also available on all major podcast platforms, so go ahead and subscribe to me there. I'm also part of Revolutionary Blackout Network, so you can find me there on Sundays, Tuesdays, and Thursdays. I'm going to say hello to all of you, and we're going to go straight into the chat just to say hello to all the people there. We have Hen's Teeth coming in saying, better question is, did Sanders sell out or did he just drop the act? Interesting question. I actually would like to answer that for you as well. Terry Connolly's also in the chat saying, good afternoon, fam. Good to see you, Terry Connolly. Good to see everybody that's on the Rockfin side as well as the Rumble side. Let's get into it. So what are we going to be talking about as well? Well, we have a couple of stories that I want to get to before we get to our main story. One of the first stories that we're going to get into today is we're going to be talking about singled out. What does this mean, and why is it that Black children in Florida were singled out in a school? We're going to be getting into that very shortly. Also, we're going to be getting into what's going on with landlords in New York apartments. Why are landlords holding New York apartments hostage? That's going to be a very interesting story that was actually submitted to me. So I would actually like to get into that too. This actually is a good lesson for us to look into, especially when we are talking about rent control and wanting to have more housing that is affordable and available to all tenants across the country. And then my main and primary story will be how Bernie Sanders sold out. We're going to be talking about how he has been all over the mainstream media and talking and trying to make a case for Joe Biden, while at the same time giving his critiques to Dr. Cornel West for dare to running for president, basically. Now, so let's get into our first story right now. Good to see all of you here today. So, Black students singled out. You know, I live in Florida, and Flagler County is not that far away from me, as many people know. And as a Black person living in Florida, this really hit me because I know what it's like to be that little kid. And to feel singled out has to be deeply abandoning. So I'm going to share an article really quick with you guys, and we'll get into it, because a lot of Black people are pissed off. So this is from the local news, Channel 9. It says Flagler schools criticized for hosting assembly that singled out Black elementary students. So this was earlier last week. And it says the Flagler School District is apologizing after parents say an assembly held Friday singled out Black students at Bunnell Elementary School. The district said they were trying to encourage the group of 4th and 5th graders to perform better on test scores. Two mothers said their children were told that if they didn't do well on their upcoming tests, they could end up dead or in jail. How in the world do you say something like that to a kid because of their test scores? Let's continue. The article goes forward. It says the district has not confirmed that specifically what was said to the students, but did admit the assembly was only for Black students and does not meet district standards. Why in the world would you do this to only Black students? It says the PowerPoint page of a PowerPoint presentation used during the assembly was titled "The Problem," followed by a bullet point that says, quote, African Americans have underperformed on standardized assessment for the past 3 years. Only 32% are at level 3 or higher. Other slides offered competitions as solutions and fast food incentives for students who got their scores up. Jacinda Arrington and Alex Smith said not only were the children singled out, parents weren't warned or given a chance to prepare their children for their conversation. And so, as far as we can see, there's a lot of anti-blackness that's happening in Florida, and people are really in outrage. And so, this is one of the biggest stories that I have seen in as far as race goes within Central Florida. And Flagler is based in Central Florida. So let's go to this article. Sorry, let's go to this. Let's go to this here. And it gives a little bit more detail. And then I'll do some commenting, on and off throughout. But let's go.
On Fox 35, a special meeting was held tonight in Flagler County. Parents got the chance to speak one-on-one with the school superintendent after Black students were singled out at an assembly. Fox 35's Stephanie Buffalanti is joining us live from Bunnell Elementary tonight. So, Stephanie, what did those parents have to say?
Those parents tell me that they're giving the school one chance to make things right. Those parents, teachers, and the school superintendent all came together tonight to look at how we move forward from this.
I want to know, as his mother, what are you all doing next?
Parents at Bunnell Elementary looking to see what the district is going to do after the school held a special assembly for only Black students to talk about improving test scores last week.
When I came into the meeting, I was still irate about the situation. No matter about the press conference, the phone calls, the emails I've had, I was still mad because the situation still happened. You can't erase it.
Parents spoke with Flagler County School Interim Superintendent LaShaka Moore about their concerns at a PTO meeting Thursday.
Actions are going to be important because this broke a lot of our trust. So we need to see what they're going to do. Is really on the school to make amends with the parents, the students, and the community.
Yesterday, I spoke with a fourth grader who told me the teacher told students this in the assembly.
I didn't like how we said that if we don't get good high scores that we could get shot, dead, or end up on jail or the side of the road. Made me feel really uncomfortable and unsafe.
Tonight, one parent
there has to be a reckoning for something like this. And you're basically telling kids that if you don't pass this test, this standardized test, that this is what your future is going to be. This is a fear tactic that is being used by a school in order to get better test scores. I thought, maybe it's just me, that the goal was to actually teach kids, not scare them into submission, not scare them into compliance. And yet, this is what's going on at Bunnell Elementary. You have 9 and 10-year-olds being scared out of their mind because teachers and administrators are saying, if you don't pass this test, you're going to wind up dead. Are you serious right now? Are you kidding me? This is crazy. And never mind the fact that standardized testing actually has racist roots. Don't believe me? I'll show you. So let me share this with you guys really quick. And then we can go back to that video. So race and class intertwine, and ultimately it's about class and keeping Black people as an underclass. And so this is why we need to constantly be vigilant when it comes to looking at race and class across the board and consistently. Unfortunately, for poor white people, they're caught in the crossfire as well because they're subject to these standardized testings too. And a lot of times it is disproportionate for them. So this is out of the Tribune. It says standardized testing is a perpetuation of white supremacy. Yes. Yes, people. Let's get into it. It says, as students near the end of their degrees, whether high school or university, many opt to continue their education. And for those whose dreams involve college and in the United States, law school or medical school, a terrifying barrier entry stands in their way. Standardized tests. Despite being known for their difficulty, the most troubling characteristics are often overlooked, including their racist origins and the way they systematically impede marginalized people's access to further education. A system conceived to benefit wealthy white men, standardized testing has continued to create additional barriers to entry for those who are already disadvantaged by the institutionalized racism present in most universities. The fight for equal access and opportunity to post-secondary education must include the removal of standardized testing from the process. Now, it's going to get into, this is actually going to get into the background, or it's going to get into the origins of standardized testing and why it has the racist roots that it has. So as we get into it, it says the precursor to most standardized tests was Scholastic Aptitude Test, the SAT. Adapted from the Army Alpha test that was supposed to evaluate future cognitive abilities, but in reality, reinforced white male cultural biases. The College Board Commission called Brigham and noted white supremacist, anti-immigrant eugenicist, and segregationist to create the SAT. His research claimed that African Americans were on the low end of a supposed racial, ethnic, and cultural hierarchy. Hence, the creation of standardized tests is inextricably tied to intellectual racism, separating different intelligence levels under the guise of science to falsely separate races. So basically, it was a means to segregate, to make white people look like they were the more superior race intellectually. And so this is what's behind the fact about standardized testing. And they're basically telling little black boys and girls that if you do not pass this test, you're going to die? How is that right? So let's get back into this cluster F. I'm trying to be more personal in my language. But let's continue.
Tonight, one parent asked the superintendent,
do you believe what they said to be true?
I don't believe that. But regardless of if I did it or if anybody else does, that is absolutely inappropriate and out of line for a school environment. You don't send them.
So the gentleman asked if do the teachers that said this, did they believe that what they said was true? If you're going to sit up in front of 200, 300, 400, 500 children, black children, knowing the history, the racist history of standardized testing, and you tell them, if you don't pass this test, you're going to wind up dead. If you got up, made this presentation and did that, that tells me something about the teacher or teachers and administrators within Bunnell Elementary. I mean, honestly, my question is, why aren't heads rolling? So I just want to get a little bit deeper into the racist history about standardized testing. I may end up going a little bit longer on my segment than I wanted to, but that's okay because this is a very important story. But anywho, let's go. So I'm going to share this really quick with you. All right. So I'm going to share this, that this is from an educator that is taught on the college, high school, middle, and elementary school level. So let's go. All right.
Watch this video for context and understanding for what I'm about to say. I'm gonna make this short, quick, brief, do it how I do it. My first reaction to this is F them schools, F that county, and F standardized test. And I say this as a 25-year educator who have taught on every level from the elementary school, middle school, high school, and now for the last 10 years on the college level. Standardized tests have a history of being anti-Black, and we have the data to prove that. You know, African Americans generally score worse on standardized tests across the board. And of course, there's exceptions to every rule, but on median, on the average, most African Americans generally do not score that well in these standardized tests. And the reason isn't that surprising. Why? Because these tests are inherently racist, and their beginnings began from racism. One of the, I guess you would say, fathers of the American standardized test movement is a eugenicist and a psychologist named Carl Brigham. Carl Brigham was well known, very popular back in the early part of the 20th century. And when I say eugenicist, he was a person who advocated for eugenics. And if you don't know much about eugenics, go and do the research on that. It was a terrible thing that was happening in this country, but in short, people were being forced, sterilized, and other ways to try to make this country more white and get rid of ethnic diversity in the United States. It was hugely popular. Over 95 states had laws, so this was a very legal practice. And this is also what influenced the Nazis to do the Holocaust. Jim Crow in the South and James Crow in the North, and the racial segregation, and the American eugenics movement is the direct cause, or I should say the direct influence of the Holocaust. So this right here is a quote from the 1923 book written by Brigham called A Study of American Intelligence, in which he looked at the American different diversity in America and the different intelligence levels. And in his book, he wrote that African Americans were on the low end of the racial, ethnic, or cultural spectrum. And he believed that testing, standardized testing, would show that the superiority of the Nordic race, which the superiority of white people over others. And he warned of the promiscuous intermingling of new immigrants and Black people in the American gene pool. So he not only advocated purification of the genetic race, white race, he also advocated standardized testing to prove that this should be done. So he was very anti-Black. Brigham had helped to develop aptitude tests for the United States Army in World War I. If you know the history about African Americans in World War I, which I might do a video on, it was a terrible experience for these soldiers because they were treated just like, pretty much they were treated terribly, horribly during that First World War.
Kind of like these kids in Bunnell Elementary, how they're being treated by teachers who are supposed to teach and protect the students. Sounds pretty horrible. So let's get into the more details, because the thing is that this racist history is pretty consistent history as far as we know as regards to how it has been implemented. So there's another TikTok that I want to share, and this actually goes over the details a little bit further. And let me share that with you guys before I continue. see. All right. Let me share that with you guys. All right. There we go. You got it. All right. So let's enlarge and go.
The perfect example of why you need systemic critique of the entire education system and what happens to schools when you remove the ability to train against implicit bias. For those that haven't heard, Flagler County Schools had an elementary school that called out all Black 4th and 5th graders to an assembly to discuss their test scores. They didn't call out all low-performing students, and it just so happened that all the low-performing students were Black. No. They literally called out all of the Black students and then told them what the problem was. The slideshow they shared said that the problem is that African Americans have underperformed on standardized assessment for the past 3 years, and only 32% are at the level 3 or higher. I would like to.
So here's my question. Why not just get all underperforming students and talk to them? This includes the Latino, white, and Asian students at the school. Why are you just singling out Black students? Because if you want to encourage all the lower performing students to do better, then you bring them all to the assembly in order to talk about it. You don't just bring one racial group to do this, because if you're bringing one racial group to do this, then you're essentially saying that by virtue of your race, that this is why you underperform, because you're Black and you need to do better. You need to fight against your dark skin in order to do better. Like, what? What a way to take a gut punch to a kid's self-esteem. What a way to really influence internalize anti-Blackness into a child. You're going to tell them that? Let's continue.
Like to state that this last sentence argues that it shouldn't have been all Black students called into this assembly in the first place, because obviously there are some that are at a level 3 or higher. But the way that the problem itself is phrased as African American students have underperformed implies that it is the fault of Black students that they are underperforming, which is actually an insane talking point, speaking as a math teacher, especially considering the new laws that states like Florida, Arkansas, Texas, and the like are passing, in which you're not even allowed to imply that there is a difference between one group of students versus another. To frame the problem as an underperformance done by the Black students does not take into account any other factors that could be potentially creating a disparity between these. Correlation does not imply causation. Just because these two groups score differently does not mean that it is the fault of one group that they score different. Actually,
and he makes a great point, because ultimately, when it comes to the socioeconomic status of Black people, we're typically in higher poverty rates as a group. There's a greater number of us in poverty simply because Black people are in underclass. We are a second class within this system. And so when you place us in that class, what ends up happening is that we do underperform on some of these tests because we don't have the same resources that more white kids in schools have. Yes, there are poor white kids, but there is a lower ratio of poor white kids and people than there is among poor Black people, because unfortunately, we are an underclass. And that's how it was from the outset that we were brought over to this country to now. 400 years worth. We have 400 years of research. And so by telling little Black boys and girls and kids that, oh, it's because you're Black and you just need to do better, what is that telling them? That's telling them that no matter how they do in life, they always have to fight by virtue of them being Black, and it's placing the blame on them rather than placing the blame on the system, because it's not them, and it's always placed as an individual problem with an individual solution, when in reality, it's a systemic problem that requires a systemic solution. And they're very blind to this.
Studies show that most standardized testing favors white students in general, especially if those white students have a higher socioeconomic status than their peers, which is why I say structural critique has to exist within the education system, because you need to be able to compare the data from this test score, all right, these 3 years of test scores from the school, to all standardized testing scores. When you do that, you get a much clearer picture that most testing favors white students, which implies that there is bias towards white students in the system of standardized testing, or even a difference between the level of education that white students receive versus black students in the same classes. And the thing is, the school district claims that this wasn't really a purposeful event, that they shouldn't have done this and it was a mistake, basically. But you can't just, whoops, we accidentally told all the black students that it's their fault they're doing bad on test scores. Presentations are planned. There was a slideshow. Someone sat down, wrote out what they were going to say, and practiced it. At the very least, you knew what that looked like. But then you take into account the fact that they told these students in this assembly that the lower you perform on test scores, the more likely you are to end up in jail or dying of gun violence. And it becomes a much clearer picture. The people working at this school who created this presentation and gave it to these students are racist. There is no other explanation. It doesn't matter if they were actively trying to be racist towards these students or if they were just unchecked in their racial biases and projecting them onto the kids. It doesn't matter. All right. Those are racist things that they did. And
that's the point. Here's the thing that I think a lot of people need to realize. You can do racist things and not consider yourself to be racist. The thing is that there are blind spots within everybody. Even a lot of us black people, we have internalized white supremacy, right? I have it, you have it, everybody has it. I don't care if you deny it, you have it. Everybody has internalized white supremacy. The problem is that a lot of white people do not realize it as well, and it will go unchecked. And so because this goes unchecked, then you will automatically think, well, I didn't do anything wrong. I'm just stating the facts. When in reality, you're putting an individual problem. You're putting a systemic problem on an individual. And you also do not realize that you as a white person benefit from this system. So therefore, if it's good for you, then you're going to sit here going, well, why can't everybody else do good? I'm doing good. That's like being a fish in water and you're looking at the bird that is drowning and you go, why are you drowning? Everything's good. Stop playing around. Stop lying to yourself. Like, how are you going to do that? See, that's the thing. The environment is perfect for you, but it is not an equal or equitable environment for the rest of us. You can't sit here and do that. And so this is why all of us need to check this bias. All of us. I have to check my biases. You have to check yours. And so this is why you have people, teachers and administrators that are doing presentations like this to black children in a school like Bunnell Elementary, because they didn't do that work. They didn't check their own biases. And then they put this out and possibly emotionally and psychologically hurt little kids. Ultimately, doing the work means that you are preventing yourself from harming other people, especially marginalized groups. We have to take the prickliness off of ourselves. We have to make ourselves safer for more marginalized groups. Because ultimately, it's about treating humanity equally and equitably with justice. And if you're not interested in that, then of course you're not going to do that work. And the work has to be done by all of us. I don't care who you are. So there was an apology that was made, and I would like to share that apology because that also is contextual in this story as well. because the Flagler County School District did jump into action, which a lot of people are applauding regarding this story. And so I'm going to go to that right now, and then we're going to see the apology that was given by the interim superintendent. Let's go.
Morning, everyone. I certainly wish I was not standing here at this moment, at this particular time, under these circumstances. Flagler Schools, they gave me a script. I'm going to read it, but you're going to hear a little bit from me too at the same time. The district does not in any way support the activity that took place at Bunnell Elementary School. To the parents and students affected by these actions of Flagler County community, we make no excuses, but extend our apology, all of our apologies. It should not have happened. If we had known about it, it wouldn't have happened. But it came to knowledge after the fact. So please understand that clearly. The district believes communication and parental involvement is essential components needed to meet the individual students and their needs. The district mission and vision is to ensure all students, let me repeat that, all students graduate and socially responsible citizens and skills necessary to reach maximum potential.
One of the things I want to bring out as well is that because of this mess that was created by Bunnell Elementary, this adds on to the anti-Blackness that we experience here in Florida day after day. Look at the governor of this state, Ron DeSantis. Ron DeSantis has made it so that our free speech has been stifled. He's made it so that as far as African American studies, he's put a nix on that. A lot of the books that are being banned are books about African American achievement within this country, about African American inventors, movements, slavery. These things are being either suppressed or banned entirely within this state. 9 and 10-year-olds are not dumb. They have ears, they have eyes, and they have hearts. And they hear what their parents talk about. They hear and see what's going on in schools. They see some of the school personnel coming in and taking some of the books that feature people who look just like them and get taken away. They see it. If you don't think they do, they do. They are much more smarter than people give them credit for. Children are brilliant. They can put 2 and 2 together. And so adding this on top of it, look what you did. And how many kids were this? Bunnell Elementary, an average elementary has what, about 350 students? Something like that. Maybe more, between 350 and 500 students. And let's just say hypothetically, a third of the population is Black, just a third. That may be about 100 to 150 kids. So doing that, that can emotionally and mentally tear them apart. Let's continue.
Flagler School Board does not support segregation. It hasn't, not this group, not for many, many, many years. So please understand, yes, a horrible, horrific mistake was made. This district will do all that it can to get us back on track and continue moving everyone forward. At this time, let me introduce to you our interim superintendent, Ms. LaShaka Moore.
Before I begin, the interim superintendent is a Black woman. I think that says something. I think that as Black people, when something like this happens, We have to jump on this as quickly as possible to mitigate as much damage, especially in a state like Florida. But the thing is that the worst part is that the damage was already done. Let's let her cook.
Good morning. As Cheryl Macero stated, the purpose of this is really to offer an apology to our students, to our families, all of our families, and to this community. And that's where we want to start, with acknowledging our heartfelt regard, because this should not have happened, but it did. And as the interim superintendent of Flagler Schools, it is my responsibility to identify why did this happen. We do have an investigation that is ongoing at this time, and we will continue to move forward as we get additional information at the conclusion of the investigation. My appeal is to our families and to this community that we continue to work together in order to help each other and improve the academic performance of all of our students here in Flagler County. Our theme as a school district this year is Flagler Forward. That means excellence and service for all of our students. We make no excuses of what happened. We offer our apology, and we offer actionable actions for us to move forward in supporting our students, supporting our schools, and supporting this community. On next week, Tuesday, we are going to offer a community forum. We have already have confirmation from many of our local community organizations, including the NAACP, African American Mentoring Program, and other local organizations that are committed to working with Flagler Schools as we improve the outcomes for all of our students. And so I ask, if you are a member of this community and you would like to be a part of this forum, please reach out to me directly so that we can get you connected and we can begin the necessary work to ensure that we don't end in this place ever again. I will offer an opportunity for any questions.
So that was the apology. I'm sure that a lot of parents appreciate that apology. And really, there needs to be training and reflection for people of every profession, no matter what, especially regarding how Black people are treated. It sucks because we live in the state of Florida. And by the way, no comment from Ron DeSantis on this issue, of course. So yeah, I'm just going to give my final thoughts on this. Telling 10-year-olds that they are the problem for low standardized test scores is abdicating responsibility and racist. If you want these kids to do better, then teach them better. If you want to teach them better, then pay teachers better. Fund schools better. Stop doing funding based on regional property tax and make it more equitable across the board. Ultimately, this requires a change in the system. Now, if you guys have noticed that I had put a link to the Brookings Institute, there was an article about racial gaps in SAT and highlights the inequality and hinders upward mobility. If you guys want to go ahead and give that a read as well, that's also in the chat. That actually talks really well about the racial inequities that are really deeply within the standardized testing as well. So with that, I'm going to be going to the chat really quick. If you guys have not, then go ahead and give a like if you guys would like to. All right, so let me go to the chat really quick. I'm going to start off in The Rock. The rock is on fire. We don't need to want to let the motherfucker burn. All right. Let me stop. All right. So we're going to start off in the rock fin, and then we'll move on into the general jizzat. All right. JB, where you at? JB, go and do that thing. JB, go and do that thing. Thanks for the tip on Rockfin. Roger says, there's been a controversy since Bush Jr. that brought in the standardized testing complex. I think it's something to do with charter schools. Perhaps it's time Black parents take control of our kids' education and start homeschooling. However, what homeschooling don't teach is socialized learning. Learning from being around peers can give you a perspective of reinforced learning by seeing from different angles. Thank you so very much. And that's actually a really good point, Roger. I think that's something that it is best. Somebody talked about doing Black charter schools, which while I do like the emphasis on community so that we can learn more about ourselves and learn from our peers, I am not a fan of charter schools because charter schools really just privatizes the problem. Not privatizes the problem, but privatizes schools. And as a socialist, communist now, I do not believe in the privatization of our education system. I believe in just making improvements. The problem with the education system is that it is constantly defunded in order to make more room for the corporate dictators. So yes, I definitely agree with you, Roger, on this. And also kids because we're social people, you know, I mean, look at what happened with a lot of the kids, especially during the pandemic, when they were basically forced into homeschooling without actually having any interaction whatsoever. So I think being social in learning is deeply important. I think that ultimately the system needs to change from the bottom up in order for us to really affect change on a fundamental level as far as the education system. So, but thank you so very much for that. Also just thank you so much to Tommy T for the very generous super sticker. That means a lot. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. It means everything. So thank you so very much. Also going to go in some other comments in the chat. Going to say hello as well. Zoe says she's going to be fired right after the parents forget about this issue. I don't know. But it feels like, I don't know. It feels like maybe not. I'm not exactly sure. But I think, honestly, that this shouldn't have happened as well. John Schmidt says actionable actions. I said the same thing. I was like, wait, shouldn't have been like actionable procedures or something like that. But look, she probably had to type that up really fast, you know, just to get ahead of this story. You know, yeah, I make the same thing. I do the same things myself too. So yeah. Whatever man says, damn, she's fired. Interim, no less. They just hung her out as a sacrificial lamb. Yeah, unfortunately, a lot of times they'll do stuff like that, you know, and ultimately, you know, this looks bad on the district because a lot of times these school districts are not ran by, well, sometimes they're ran by Black people, but not all the time. And so the sensitivity of what happened, a Black person will understand. Not saying that a white person can't empathize, but they can sympathize. You know what I'm saying? And so it's up to people to have the empathy and try to put themselves in the shoes of the students. And I think that's what she was trying to do, despite being put out there. You know, and it's a bad look regarding what the school did for the district. And now she has the job to have to turn that around because of the blind spots of some teachers and administrators in Bunnell Elementary. So John Smith says, if you want to teach them better, have the class size, and stop letting McGraw-Hill write the curriculum. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much, Rebel Seer. Thank you so much. Rebel says, JB, you are such a fantastic teacher. I appreciate it. I like to teach. I like to do whatever I can. Janice Anderson says, not everyone learns the same way. Some are visual, some are auditory, some kinesthetically, physically doing. Schools should have lessons that focus on each way. This basically goes into what I always say, teach the way a kid learns. And they don't do that because it is ultimately about churning kids out because of the system that we live in, because it's about creating workers. So they don't have the time or the resources in order to invest into being more focused on an individual child's needs and to teach them the way they learn. If you actually did that, then, well, we'd actually have a better society, especially if you start teaching critical thinking instead of compliance. But that's basically what it's about. So now, thank you so very much for that. I would like to get into my next story. So the next story we're going to be talking about as well, and this one is interesting. We're going to be talking about landlords holding New York apartments hostage. This is going to be a very interesting one because, you know, when I saw this story, shout out to Roger Meadows, I was just like, wait, what? Let's get into this one. All right. So there's an article that was brought out that I would like to share. And this really just goes into why I am not a fan of landlords. And you all know this. You guys know me. I'm not a fan of landlords. Never have been, never will be, actually. Because ultimately it's about holding back people from having their own. And it's just like workers need to own the means of production. Workers also need to have their own homes. So let's get into this. This is The Gothamist. It says more than 13,000 rent-stabilized units in New York City are sitting empty for multiple years, report finds. So we're going to be talking about this. This is actually going to be very interesting. This is out of New York. So it starts, it says more than 13,000 rent-stabilized apartments sat empty over the past 2 years amid a heated debate over warehousing low-cost units, according to new review of state data. Tenant organizations, landlord groups, and policymakers have been trying to determine the exact number of empty rent-stabilized units in New York as the city contends with a dire housing shortage, surging homelessness, and record-breaking rents. The city's independent budget office reviewed the state data and found that the number of empty rent-stabilized apartments decreased significantly from 2021 to 2022 following a pandemic-related exodus from Manhattan. Landlords listed 42,275 rent-stabilized apartments as of April 1st of last year, with most of those apartments marked as newly vacant, the IBO said. The agency said 13,362 units sat empty for at least 2 consecutive years, up from 12,300 in 2021, suggesting that they were vacant for reasons other than routine movement of tenants. No shit, Sherlock. So why in the hell are they doing this? Why are landlords making these apartments sit vacant? What's the point? Because if they're rent control and they're sitting vacant, are you not making money? It seems kind of counterintuitive, doesn't it? Well, let's get into this even more. There's actually a gentleman, I'll say that is actually talking about this from more of the landlord perspective. But he actually gives the answer, and it's really more, I don't think he means to make it sound nefarious, but it does. So let me go to this. Let's go to this. And I'm not going to share this entire video, but, you know, I would like to start off. And here's what he says. Okay, let's go past the intro. All right.
Block a building in the East Village, and 4 of those apartments are vacant and have been vacant for over 5 years. Let's count them. Vacant, 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 vacant. All right, why is that? So essentially, a law was passed in 2017 for affordable rent, which I'm all for. Seriously, we all need a place to live. And essentially, so when someone moves out of a rent-stabilized unit, you cannot increase the price anymore. So my building, there's an 85-year-old guy, he dies, the landlord can't increase the rent, doesn't renovate the apartment, and they're betting the...
Hold up. First of all, doesn't this guy look like Jerry from Liar Liar? Oh, here's the claw. Here's the claw. You're scared of the claw. You're scared of the claw. Doesn't he look like Jerry from Liar Liar? The boyfriend? He looks like him to me for some reason. Oh my goodness. This is sorry. Let's continue. Sorry. It's just I just made an observation. Anywho.
Doesn't renovate the apartment, and they're betting the law is going to change back. So it just sits vacant, taking an apartment away from a New Yorker. And just in the East Village, I know for a fact, there's over 4,000 vacant apartments. What's your take?
All right, so I shouldn't have to say anything about rent control. I've been going over rent control for a while now, and I think I've brought up almost every single one of the points of why it does not work, okay? It disincentivizes people from wanting to actually rent their properties out, and actually, because of that, the number of affordable housing units decreases. Now, the 2019 rent stabilization law, what it did was it took away the ability for the landlords to actually raise rent between tenants, you know, so they can make improvements, raise rents up, and, you know, recover some of the costs that were associated with the improvements that they made. So,
why is he wrong? Go ahead in the chat, in the comments, tell me why is he wrong? Now, I'm going to tell you why I think he's wrong. Let's go. So he said that keeping rent stabilized disincentivizes landlords from renting apartments and recovering the funds so that it improves units and raises rents, and they raise rents to recover the costs. Never mind that landlords are just scalpers that are the middlemen that gatekeep housing from people. If the goal is to raise rents in the first place, then why get rid of rate stabilization? If you get rid of rent control, rent goes up. If you keep rent control, rent goes up. To me, the solution is just to get rid of the middleman. Get rid of landlords. That's my solution, right? But he would probably disagree with that. Let's continue.
So without that incentive, a lot of landlords are just saying to themselves, well, we're not going to make those improvements. We're not even going to rent these units. We're just going to leave them vacant. So like I said before, if you disincentivize landlords from, you know, wanting to rent their units out, that will lead to a further affordable housing shortage and make it harder for tenants overall. The cost will skyrocket in those units that are not rent controlled, okay? And this is exactly what we're seeing in New York right now.
This sounds like they're holding housing and housing units hostage in order to raise rents with impunity. right? This is why I call this a hostage situation. They're basically holding the hostage because they can't make more profits. If that's the case, then why don't they put on their adult underwear and get a real job? This is basically greed. And so, thank you so much for coming, sir. But yeah, that is crazy on his face, because either way you look at it, rents are going up anyway. So if we stabilize the rents, you guys are going to have a hissy fit and go, I want to raise prices higher so that I can make as much money as possible, even though I already have a house. Let me gatekeep housing. That's what it's like. Just a bunch of babies whining and taking their ball and going home because they can't scalp people who need homes. That's basically what it is. Now, a lot of people may disagree, but I think you're wrong. But you can disagree all you want. But here's the thing. Houses are meant to live in. If you're a landlord, that's not a job. That's basically it. It's not a job. All right, so I have a video that I would like to share. And you're going to see that Jerry looking guy again. And there's going to be a reply from somebody who thinks more along the lines of myself. So let's go. You're scared of the claw. Here's the claw.
Okay, so I'm essentially a retired real estate broker.
And I'm a socialist who helped pass those laws in 2019. And there's a level of analysis missing from this guy's TikTok. The law itself had some pretty common sense protections, like restricting the amount that a landlord could charge for an application fee so they couldn't just pocket the money. And the laws provided stronger protections for tenants so landlords couldn't just harass people out of their apartments that were rent stabilized or rent controlled and then renovate them and flip them onto the market for a much higher rent. And if you notice, the guy's talking about how there are all these vacant apartments, right? We're supposed to be in a housing crisis here in New York City. But the fact is that there's so much inventory that landlords aren't willing to release simply because they think that they can get more money for it if the laws were to change.
So this is one of the points that I want to make. This is why when people say that, oh my gosh, housing is, we just need more affordable housing. No, we don't. So here's my problem. This is basically like saying to a hungry family, oh, we just need cheaper food. When in reality, you're sitting there homeless and hungry behind a glass, and you have this banquet table full of food, and you have just one, maybe two people sitting at the table, and they're holding that food back from you, and then they're saying, well, all you need to do is just get more cheaper food for yourself, when in reality, there's all that food that's there that's available for them. How is that fair? You're not even going to be able to finish all that food. And yet you're going to hold people back from having some? That sounds sociopathic to me. It's wild, man. We don't need more affordable housing. We just need to give the housing to people who need it. Continue.
Landlords are holding New Yorkers hostage right now. The solution is not giving into landlord greed. It's doing things like building more social housing and passing things like good cause eviction so we can all afford to live here.
So right on from that gentleman. And So I think that it is a hostage situation that really needs to be mitigated through laws. And so this is why it is important for us to fight the system as much as we possibly can so that people aren't suffering as much, because ultimately, who is perpetuating this disaster? It is really the greed of landlords. That's basically it. So let me share this as well. Here he goes, saying something that is outdated. So let's continue. This young lady, she actually corrects him.
There are nearly 100,000 vacant apartments in New York City. In 2019, a Tenant Protection Act.
This creator has been spreading so much misinformation about the 2019 Tenant Protection Act. Just want to set the record straight on several things because it's getting fucking annoying at this point. First and foremost, he's been starting with this headline that there are 100,000 vacant apartments in New York City. As of April 2022, there were only 38,000 vacant rent-stabilized units, which is the only type of apartments that this law applies to when it comes to what he's talking about. Source. 2. His argument is around major capital improvements, which are essentially when a landlord needs to make renovations to an apartment, how much money can they then charge the incoming tenant or current tenant for those improvements that they need to make. This includes things like making sure there's heat, hot water, electricity, paint, pretty typical stuff that landlords should expect to have to pay for. Prior to the 2019 law, when a unit was vacant and a landlord had a major capital improvement, they could increase the rent up to 20%. The law changed that rate to 2% maximum.
So imagine if you imagine having an apartment and you move out and you move to a different apartment. And the apartment that you're moving into, the prior tenant was paying $1,000. Now, since you're a new tenant moving into that same apartment, the landlord is now charging $1,200. Never mind that they made profit off the $1,000 already, but now they're raising the rent even more. And they're saying, well, it's to make improvements to the apartment. We want to improve the apartment. When, number one, y'all should have saved up for that. Number two, as far as fixing all the wear and tear, as long as, if the wear and tear is beyond the pale, then this is what happens when you keep the security deposit. But if it's just normal wear and tear, well, that's part of the cost of business, right? And then they want to raise it to $1,200. But then after you move, then they're going to raise it another 20%, which means that the apartment is going to go up to $1,450. So there's going to be another 20% and another 20% and another 20%. And if they can keep people circulating instead of staying there, then that means that they can bump up rents super fast over a short period of a few years. So this is why some of them are like, well, if I have a 6-month lease, then I can turn out 2 people a year versus a year lease. And this is just a money-making scam in my eyes.
Which, don't get me wrong, I don't think that that's the right number, but I don't think that that supports the argument that this creator is trying to make. That leads me to 3. The 2019 Act had so many protections for tenants that are really important, and this creator is just glazing over them. These include things like a cap to how much a landlord could ask for a deposit, a cap to how much they could ask for a rental application, and increased protections for rent-stabilized units, which leads me to...
And you know what's funny? I had no idea in New York you pay brokerage fees. Brokerage fees? I can't even say it right. Brokerage fees. That is crazy. Like, I never heard of. I'm like, what in the hell is a brokerage fee? I live in Florida. We don't have no damn brokerage fees. Like look, it is deposit, first month, application fee. That's it. That's all. That's all we got here in Florida. And you mean to tell me y'all gotta do first, last, make 3 times the rent, brokerage fees, all that? I'm like, what in the world? What are y'all doing up there? How do you survive, man? It's crazy, bro. This is ridiculous. That's New York.
Point number 4. This creator failed to mention a very important component of the 2019 Act that left a lot of landlords really pissed off. This was the change, or rather elimination, of a high rent vacancy, which was essentially when an apartment was over $2,700 a month market rate, and or the renter was making more than $200,000 and it was vacant for more than a month, the apartment could be destabilized, as in taken completely out of rent stabilization, and the landlord could then post it at a market rate. Since rent stabilization laws went into effect in 1993, over 150,000 units have been deregulated because of this law. Source: those 150,000 units that were deregulated are in addition to 130,000 units that were deregulated for other reasons. But regardless of what part of the 2019 Act this creator wants to complain about, at the end of the day, his argument is null and void because, according to the 2021 Housing and Vacancy Survey, the vacancy rate of market rate units and rent stabilized units both hovered around 4.5%. So this creator's idea that rent stabilized units are so much harder to fill for these landlords is just absolutely ridiculous. Please stop spreading misinformation, especially when it's...
So yeah, you got to be careful with some of these creators, especially the ones that are landlords, because they'll try to make it seem like they're suffering during the press group. Oh my God, they're trying to take over the renters. When in reality, it's never been a system that's been for us, ever. That's like the whole reverse racism argument. Oh gosh. And this is class warfare. That's all it is. It's basically people who own the means of production, or in this case, own the means of survival, which is housing. And then they're saying, well, you need to come up with the money to pay me, and I can charge you no matter what. With impunity, I can go as high as I want to. And if you don't like it, well, then live out on the street. And it's not that they have their own home, but they have multiple homes, which they basically scalp and say, okay, you have to pay me whatever I say I want, and then you guys can have housing. But then when we actually speak out and then make it so that they can't do whatever they want, then that's when they go, no, we're being oppressed. When in reality, they were oppressing us by gatekeeping housing in the first place. Landlords are an antiquated, unnecessary institution that needs to go away. Burn it with fire. Burn it with fire and make it go away, because this institution sucks. So, in my final thoughts, it says this is why we need real housing for all. Making sure that private equity like Blackstone can't own housing and raising rents on units and houses makes us a nation of renters and turns us into a more depressed underclass. Citizen ballot initiatives can be a defense against this, since it goes around the politicians and pushes the choice in the hands of the people. Until we can get rid of landlords, we must do what we can to defend against their parasitic tactics to leech off of workers. And that's it. So I am going to head into the chat really quick. And if you guys have not, then make sure to give the stream a like as well. Let's go to the chat. Starting off at Rockfin. All right. Thanks for the tip on Rockfin Roger. He shares a link. Says Queens is the 13th most expensive, and Long Island's Nassau County, where I live, is the 15th. This is out of a link from timeout.com. And I'll share that really quick just to read the title. Thank you so very much for that, Roger. It says Manhattan is the most expensive place to live in the United States. It says the cost of living is more than double the national average according to the Council for Community and Economic Research's Cost of Living Index. So yeah, and that's the problem, is that they have made rents go up over the last 30 years. They have been building upon over and over and over. 20%. All right, move the next person out. 20% more. Move the person in, then move them out. Charge 20% more. Move them in, move them out. Charge 20% more, and on and on and on until next thing you know, you have from $500 of rent to like $4,000 rent, and then it's only been like 10 to 15 years. And then you're sitting there going, well, why did rents go up so high? Well, because you have greedy ass landlords that don't have rent stabilization. And then when you try to put in rent stabilization, they have a hissy fit, and then they don't want to rent out to nobody. And now they're just waiting for the laws to change so that they can charge with impunity how much they want, thus causing a housing crisis. And because they're making the housing stock so small because they're no longer renting, that means that the other people who are renting can upcharge their rents even higher. It's artificially inflating rents when we actually have enough housing stock. It is crazy, crazy, crazy. All right, so let's go to the rest of the chat. Creative Experiment says, San Francisco landlords whine that they are too poor to upgrade fire safety. We're too lazy. Sorry. We're too poor to make our housing units safer for tenants so that they don't burn on fire. It's crazy. All right. John to Emily, good to see you. Says landlords are evil people. You ain't saying nothing but a word, John to Emily. Jenna Colby says guillotine the rentier class. Absolutely. Miguel says, agree, JB. Let's start with corporate landlords. Absolutely. Corporate landlords are a disease in this country that needs to be cured. Cobra Commander says, fun fact, there are 8 million landlords in America that control all the rental property. 8 million. Sean Miller says that's about 2.5%. Yep. That's the 2%, right? And like 2% that has been sitting for too long, it's like spoiled milk, they need to be thrown out. Dwayne says capitalism is institutionalized exploitation. Absolutely. So, yeah, that's the story. Before I get into my next story, if you guys would like, I would like to give a shout out to the patrons on Patreon as well as Coffee. For without you guys, I would not be able to do what I do, because without you guys, I wouldn't have a channel. And I just want to thank you guys for that very, very much. As well as, in addition to, if you guys would like to support the channel, you guys could literally go to Patreon and support me in my channel. So thank you so very much as well to all the people who support the channel who are scrolling by below. So thank you. And if you guys would like to, you guys can also go to jaybefaunt.substack.com to get email notifications to be notified whenever I go live or upload clips. That's basically, or have articles. And in fact, as you guys may not know, an article about my next story that I'm going to be getting into just dropped during this stream. So if you guys would like to, you guys can also go to jaybefaunt.substack.com to go and read my article regarding Bernie Sanders. That is going to be something that I just wrote up a little something. See if you guys like it and share it if you think it's pertinent. So thank you so very much to everyone. Oh, yeah. And in addition to, and furthermore, I'm also raising funds for the chapter, the Revolutionary Blackout Network, Orlando chapter for mutual aid. We're going to be giving out care packages for our houseless neighbors. These are going to be toiletries. These things can be things like toothbrush, toothpaste, razors for shaving, socks, feminine hygiene products, things like this to all of our homeless neighbors out there who are especially in places like downtown Orlando that aren't close to shelters. This is what we're going to be doing. So if you guys would like to, you guys can go to Cash App $Orlando RBN if you would like to. Thank you so very much in advance for that as well. Now, the primary story for today. Sold out. This is going to be a story that I have been holding back on. And it really needs to be said now because there is nobody who I am more angry at because even being poor, I gave a little bit to Bernie, money-wise. Like, I did like $5 a month at the time. And I was still broke. I was poor. I was still struggling. But I believed so much into what his message was that I was like, look, I'm willing to sacrifice in order to have a systemic change so that I and my family and my neighbors around me can actually have a better life. Then he skipped out. So that's part of what I wrote in my article, but Bernie had went on a tour, and this tour basically was a sheep herding tour. So let's get into that. All right, folks. It's going to get messy. So shout out to Case Study QB for clipping this. Case Study QB is doing the damn thing. If you guys have not, then subscribe to Case Study QB on YouTube and Twitter. He does great work. We are going to be examining this. And yeah.
Republicans battle it out for their party's nomination. Democrats are fighting to hold their coalition together, with polls showing low enthusiasm for a second Biden term. It could be why former Biden challenger and now supporter, Senator Bernie Sanders, took his message to the key early voting state of New Hampshire yesterday, where he laid out what he calls the agenda Americans need. Here's part of his speech.
Democrats, through words and action, must make it clear that they stand with a struggling working class. In my view, if Democrats are prepared to do that, they will win this election and win it comfortably. If not, frankly, I am not sure what the election outcome will be, or for that matter, what the future of our country holds.
Joining me now is Senator Bernie Sanders. Thank you so much for joining me, sir. In your speech yesterday, you urged Democrats to make it clear which side they're on when it comes to the working class. And you said if we're going to defeat the creeping authoritarianism and right-wing extremism, there has to be an ideological change of course. Can you explain what you mean by that?
So before Bernie answers, and I want to implement my 2 cents regarding this. So an ideological change, of course, is foolish of Bernie to think that an ideological shift can occur within the party that is swimming in corporate money. So bad that progressives obey corporate Democrats and toe the party line. If progressives don't actually go against the party, then what good are they? Because if you look at the squad and if you look at people like Jamal Bowman, AOC, Rashida Tlaib, Mark Pocan, Ilhan Omar, Pramila Jayapal, they toe the party line through and through. So if that's the case, what use are they? Because if you're talking about an ideological shift, that means you have to go beyond what the progressives are talking about. You have to go beyond what the progressives propose. You have to go beyond progressivism. Because within that party, it really doesn't exist when you think about it. So let's let Bernie speak.
Well, what I mean by that, Dana, is that the president has a right to be very proud of many of the accomplishments that we've achieved in the last 3 years. Unemployment very, very low. We brought inflation down. We're investing in clean energy. We're rebuilding our infrastructure. We have made real progress in a number of areas. But the reality is that today, 60% of our people are living paycheck to paycheck. We have massive levels of income and wealth inequality. 3 people or more wealth in the bottom half of America. Our healthcare system is a total disaster. 85 million people uninsured, underinsured, while the insurance companies make huge profits. The cost of pharmaceutical drugs, prescription drugs, sky high. So the point is, in my view, the president should tout his very good record. We have got to continue to defend women's right to control their own bodies.
Biden has major accomplishments. Then he proceeds to tell you how the country got worse. Like, make that make sense. Biden is doing great, but the country is horrible. And the thing is that you know that these things aren't going to happen overnight, but I don't see my life has improved at all. It's like, which one is it, Bernie? The contradictions are confusing for many of us because we don't see progress in our own material conditions. This reduction of inflation hasn't brought me relief, and I'm poor. Like, what are you talking about? And then he talks about women's right to control their own bodies, like the overturning of Roe v. Wade under the Biden administration. How is that a victory? Protecting women's rights. If you would have did that, then Biden should have. If Biden cares so much about women, why didn't he do that within his first 100 days to codify Roe v. Wade into law? Didn't Biden have a majority? Didn't he have a majority in the House? And Kamala Harris could be the tiebreaker in the Senate? Yeah. So miss me with that. Miss me with that, Bernard. All right. Well, let's continue.
But we have to deal with the reality of life today. That's what Roosevelt did back in 1936. And that is to understand that we have massive levels of corporate greed in every part of society. Very rich are getting richer. Working people are struggling. We have got to make it clear. We're going to stand with those workers. We're going to have a healthcare system that works for all, lower the cost of prescription drugs, raise the minimum wage to a living wage. And so I think that was the message of yesterday.
You called it.
Look, the Democrats aren't doing that either. Dear God.
Absolutely absurd that Republicans are gaining support, maybe even in some cases have more support for from the working class than Democrats do.
Yeah.
Why is that? Why is the message that you gave in your speech that you just said right now not resonating when it's coming from the White House?
Well, that's a great question. And here's the absurdity. You have a Republican Party that wants to give massive tax breaks to billionaires, a Republican Party that does not want to raise the minimum wage, a Republican Party that opposes legislation that will give workers the right to form unions, a Republican Party which wants to cut Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. And the reason I think they do well among working class people is the Democrats have not been strong enough to oppose that agenda and present a strong alternative agenda.
So here's my issue. All the things that he just blamed the Republicans for, the Democrats do as well. Like, it doesn't make sense for you to blame them without looking at the Democrats too. Bernard, the call is coming from inside the House. Look, the Democrats aren't doing that either. Biden has yet to repeal the Trump tax cuts, which still allows corporations to make billions more in profits, but keep our pay at an abysmal rate. How is the minimum wage under Democrats? Even when it is raised, we still get crumbs. As for unions, don't make me laugh. Like, the Railroad Workers Union would love a word right now, Bernie. Biden is literally trying to privatize Medicare. Don't believe me? I'll show you. Let's stop from here for just a second and let's take a look, because people are literally sounding the alarm, and a lot of people do not realize that this is what somebody like Joe Biden is doing. It's like, I have to spell this out for a sitting senator. Like, what in the hell? All right. Says Biden's little publicized Medicare privatization scheme is starting to raise alarm bells. Says the Biden administration hasn't stopped trying to privatize Medicare, but a pushback is gaining steam. So basically, what they're doing is pursuing privatization for a public service. And so Bernie's trying to make the case that Biden and the Democrats are no different than Republicans, when in reality, what we've seen is Biden and the Democrats just like Republicans. Oh, geez. All right. Let's let them cook, I guess. Anywho. Let's go back. Go ahead, Bern.
In other words, you can't be pro-labor and pro-worker unless you have the guts to take on these large, profitable corporations who are exercising an unprecedented level of corporate greed.
Which the Democrats do not do. All you need to do is go to opensecrets.org and you can actually see the fact that they do not take them on because they're literally the lapdogs for the corporate oligarchs that are in this country. So when they don't have the guts, or like we like to say, intestinal fortitude to actually go up against them, because they're their masters. They're basically the Anakin Skywalkers that are kneeling in front of the Darth Sidious and saying, you know, I will do whatever you ask. And then the corporate landlords go, good. Darth Democrats.
American people have got to know the reason that inflation was high last year was not because primarily of the war in Ukraine or a breakdown in supply chain. It was because of corporate greed in the fossil fuel industry, in the food industry, in the pharmaceutical industry. These guys raised prices like crazy while they made record-breaking profits.
I want to ask you about the UAW. In your speech, you referenced the fact that the United Auto Workers overwhelmingly approved possible strikes at 3 major automakers. More than 145,000 UAW workers could be on the picket line next month if a deal isn't reached. I'm sure you've heard President Biden. He says that he's not that concerned about a strike, but do you think that he should support a strike? And do you worry that any of this and all of this could undercut an economic rebound?
So before Bernie answers, I need to say that Biden will interfere. He's going to try to stop it by any means necessary and screw over the striking workers. This is going to be the real workers union all over again. Mark my words. Do you actually think that Biden is going to be on the side of workers and say, yeah, you guys need to strike? No. And the crazy part is, perish the thought, it would literally help Biden if he stood behind them when they went to strike. If he said, yeah, you guys go ahead and go on strike, that would literally help him. But it goes against the corporate dictators. That's not what Biden's about. You see, here's the difference between somebody like myself and Bernie Sanders. I trust a snake to do what a snake does. If a snake tells me otherwise, I don't believe the snake. I'm not going to pick up the snake even though it tells me, hey, I'm friendly, pick me up. And then it bites me, and I go, ow, you bit me. That's when the snake goes, well, you knew I was a snake when you picked me up. I trust him to be who he is. A leopard cannot change his spots. And a 79, 80-year-old leopard definitely sure as hell ain't changing his spots. Especially one that's in cognitive decline. So you're going to tell me that somebody like Joe Biden is not going to do what he did to the Rail Workers Union, even though that's what he did? He's set in his ways. He's not going to. Who do you take me for? Do I look like a fool to you? Don't answer that question. Oh, gosh. Let's continue.
Well, Donna, one of the I think very positive things that's happening in America today is that working class people are standing up and fighting back. We've just seen the Teamsters take on UPS and win a really strong contract for their workers. We're seeing nurses all over this country stand up and fight back for decent wages and working conditions and for their patients. Right now, what you have is the big three auto industry. They're making huge profits, while real wages for those workers have not kept up with inflation over the last 10 or 20 years. So I very strongly support the UAW and their new leadership standing up and fighting back. Yeah. And I certainly hope there is not going to be a strike. No one wants a strike. But the big three have got to understand they cannot have it all. They can't make.
I want to strike because I'm sick and tired of these corporations, but that's just me.
Huge profits, give exorbitant compensation packages to their CEOs and ignore the needs of workers. So I hope they will sit down with the union and negotiate a contract that is fair to the workers in the industry.
Now, I know that Savvy is going to be talking about the UAW worker strike in more detail. So if you guys would like to, you guys can actually stay tuned for that. I think they're going to be talking about an RBN too. But you guys go ahead and tune into them as well to talk about the more details about that. I may cover it a little bit later when a little bit more details come out. But yes, this is what's happening regarding the United Auto Workers. That's also going to be massive if they do go on strike. And I really do hope that they do, especially in the next few weeks, because it is absolutely imperative that they get what they need as workers.
Senator Sanders, Cornel West, who is a close ally of yours,
Here we go. Here we go. Y'all ready? Here we go.
He is running a third-party campaign for president. He recently criticized you for endorsing President Biden's reelection. Listen to what he said.
I love the brother, and you know, even in love, people have deep disagreements about these things. But I think, again, he's fearful of the neo-fascism of Trump. People look at Biden, they don't really want to tell the full truth. He's created the best economy that we can get. Is this the best that we can get? You gonna tell that lie to the people just for Biden to win?
First of all, hold up. Yo, Bernie had to lie to keep you in the Democratic Party. Think about that. He knew this wasn't the best type of economy. He knows Bidenomics is garbage. It's trash. These are strong words from Dr. West. I was not expecting this. For him to go so strongly in his rhetoric. Look, many are hurting even more. Homeless rates are increasing. Rents are going up. Pay is stagnant. People still don't have adequate health care. The race to the bottom is ridiculous. But Bernie's going to tell you that this is the best that we can get. Fuck that. It's not the best that we can get. And we can actually have something better. But Bernie feels otherwise. So let's hear what he has to say.
What's your reaction to that?
Well, my reaction is that it certainly is not the best economy that we can create. That was what my speech was about yesterday. We've got to join the rest of the industrialized world, guarantee healthcare to all. We've got to cut the cost of prescription drugs in half. We've got to raise the minimum wage to at least $17 an hour. We've got to build
17 an hour? What? Hold up. Did this dude just say 17 an hour? God, he's a one-trick pony. What decade is Bernard living in? According to the National Low-Income Housing Coalition, states like Michigan, Georgia, Texas, Pennsylvania, and Minnesota, you have to make over $20 an hour just to afford a two-bedroom apartment to survive. Never mind states like New Jersey, California, or my home state of Florida, where you need to make over $30 an hour just to survive. Holy crap. This is wicked. And you're telling me that, oh, well, this is the best that we can do. 17 an hour? Bernard, you don't dream big enough, do you? My goodness.
the affordable housing we desperately need. But where I disagree with my good friend, Cornel West, is I think in these really very difficult times where there is a real question whether democracy is going to remain in the United States of America. You know, Donald Trump is not somebody who believes in democracy. Whether women...
The Democrats don't believe in democracy either. What makes you think that they do? Hold up. Is this the same guy that got cheated twice? And he's saying he got cheated by his own party twice. And now he's saying, well, you know, we gotta remain in, we gotta keep democracy. The Democrats don't even have democracy. They actually argued that in court to keep out democracy. So what are we doing here? What's this? What's going on, Bernie? What are you doing? Huh? My Jersey side is coming out. Good Lord. Come on, bro. There ain't no democracy, not even the party.
Women are going to be able to continue to control their own bodies. Whether we have social justice in America, we end bigotry. Around that, I think we have got to bring the entire progressive community to defeat Trump or whoever the Republican nominee will be, support Biden, but at the same time, which is what I did yesterday, is demand that the Democratic Party, not just Biden, have the guts to take on corporate greed and the massive levels of income and wealth inequality that we see today.
Which he doesn't. They don't. And they haven't for at least a long time. And that's me being kind saying that. that they haven't said that for a long time. So there's more. And let me get to this as well. And shout out to CJ of RBN, Revolutionary Blackout Network, for also showing this. So let me share my screen. Because this was just, Bernie was making the rounds, man. He was going all over. He was like, well, let me try to salvage this so that Joe Biden won't lose, even though he's going to lose. He's going to lose badly. He's going to lose handedly. And it's gonna look, people are gonna be like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe that he lost, when in reality it's like yeah, he lost. Hang on, let me make sure. All right, so Bernie Sanders talking to Chuck Todd on Meet the Press. Come on, start. Begin. Oh gosh, I hate when Twitter does this. Oh, okay, so
on the big money and trust.
All right, we'll start there.
And by the way, the existential issue of our time is whether or not we address climate change. And we have made some steps forward, but there is no question in my mind, if we're going to provide allow our kids and grandchildren to live on a healthy planet, we've got a lot more to do.
Do you think they're...
So he talks about the issue about climate change, but you and I both know, those of you that are watching, that Biden's not good on that either. Biden approved of the Willow Project. Remember that? The Willow Project that is in northern Alaska, that's actually drilling for more oil, or about him approving more drilling permits offshore of Texas. Biden is not addressing the climate issue. So if this is your push to make the case for Biden, when you look at the facts on the ground, it actually looks worse for Biden, because he's not doing the things that you say he's doing, or you're not making the case that he's going to improve on the things that he's trying to do. Biden is just the standard issue. Republican, Democrat, they're all the same.
Be a robust discussion on this on the left if there were a competitive primary? Do you think there should be?
Well, what I think in this particular time, this particular moment in American history, when we're taking on somebody, the former president, who in fact does not believe in democracy, he's an authoritarian and a very, very dangerous person. I think at this moment, there has got to be a unification of progressive people in general all over this country, people who are prepared to make sure that women control their own body, that we deal with climate change, that we represent the needs of the working class of this country and take on the billionaire class.
Let me tell you something. This is going to be very important. Those issues have not improved under Biden, though. We're constantly told to wait. And we're told that Biden would just be someone who could return us back to normal, right? Now that Biden has had 4 years and we're not back to normal, now we have to keep him in, even though we have a candidate that's running on a better platform than Bernie. What? And we in this person that is running is not being held back by the same party that screwed you, Bernie. And just telling us, just wait, or now's not the time, I'm going to say it. I'm going to say it. Bernie Sanders is the white moderate that MLK warned us about. Let's take a look. Because the thing is that he told us to wait. Oh. Oops. I made a mistake. What? That's weird. Yeah. All right. That was weird. My link didn't work. Oh, well. This is Bernie Sanders now. This is his legacy.
First, I must confess that over the past few years, I have been gravely disappointed with the white moderate. I have almost reached the regrettable conclusion that the Negro's great stumbling block in his stride toward freedom is not the white citizens' counselor or the Ku Klux Klaner, but the white moderate, who is more devoted to order than to justice, who prefers a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to a positive peace, which is the presence of justice, who constantly says, I agree with you in the goal you seek, but I cannot agree with your methods of direct action, who paternalistically believes he can set the timetable for another man's freedom, who lives by a mythical concept of time, and who constantly advises the Negro to wait for a more convenient season.
That's basically what Bernie just did. Just wait till a more convenient season. Right? Didn't MLK say the time to do what's right is always right? It's always the time to do what's right. And yet, when you try to do that, Bernie says, well, just wait. Wait a second. We can't do that. You can't just do whatever it is that we actually need to do in this country. So basically, Bernie has become the white moderate that MLK warned us about. I want my money back, by the way. No, real talk. I want my money back because I'm sick and tired of this. Anyway.
One way that you make it clear that age isn't a factor with you is you're pretty energetic. We see you travel the country. You show up on, you do interviews. It is clearly an issue for many voters when it comes to President Biden. He's a year younger than you. You have advice to him on how he should assuage those concerns in the public about his age?
Look, when people look at a candidate, whether it's Joe Biden or Trump or Bernie Sanders, anybody else, they have to evaluate a whole lot of factors. I met with the president, 5 or 6 weeks ago. We had a great discussion. He seemed fine to me. But I think at the end of the day, what we have got to ask ourselves is, what do people stand for? Do you believe the women have a right to control their own bodies? Well, the president has been strong on that.
Wrong.
Do you think that climate change is real, or do you agree with the Republicans that it's a non-issue?
Apparently his actions speak louder than his words, because he's actually doing actions that agree with Republicans more than he does what the Democrats believe, because he's actually approving of drilling as well as the Willow Project that's in northern Alaska. So we all know the answer to that question.
Do you think we should raise the minimum wage? Do you think
that hasn't happened either? So, still $7.25 an hour in this country. So
we should reform and take on the pharmaceutical industry? So age is an issue, Chuck, but there are a lot of broader issues than just that.
And here's the thing that Chuck Todd and Bernie Sanders aren't talking about. They're skating around the issue. Here's the thing. It's not actually age that is actually really the issue. It's the fact that Joe Biden is in cognitive decline. If somebody would look, I'm 39, right? I know I look good for 39. Go ahead. I know I look good. Anyway, but being the age that I am, if I knew another person in their 30s that was in cognitive decline that was trying to run for office, I would be like, yeah, no, this person shouldn't run for office because they're in cognitive decline. Why would I try to make a case for that? It's not about the age issue. It's about the person being in cognitive decline. We all see it. Don't tell us that our eyes are lying to us and our ears are fibbing. Don't tell us that, because that's exactly what's going on. And this is the part that it's like, Bernie, you're manipulating here. That's what you're doing. You're trying to manipulate in order for scaring people into voting rather than inspiring people. And if you really wanted to, you would inspire, but there's nothing to inspire from because Joe Biden's not inspiring. So therefore, the only method you have is to scare people into voting for him. You're a fearmonger, Bernie. That's the problem. It gets worse. Oh.
Let me ask you about Cornel West. He was a co-chair of your campaign in 2020. He's flirting with a Green Party bid for president. The numbers tell the story between 2020. You can directly correlate the two third-party candidates, their collective total. That was the difference between Biden winning states and Clinton losing those key states.
He wants to do. I just think, again, Mel or anybody else can play an important role now about raising issues that are not always discussed. But at the end of the day, I think the progressive community in general and the American people have got to make a decision as to whether we stand for democracy or authoritarianism, or whether or not we're going to represent working class families.
Are you trying to dissuade Cornel from running? Bernie never answered the question. That was a politician-y answer, and everybody knows it. The answer is yes. The answer is yes. They had to get their strongest dude out there to dissuade people from going outside of the duopoly. They literally had to drag Bernie out to say, stop Cornel at all costs. That's basically what this is. This is a Stop Cornell operation. They're threatened. They're deeply threatened by him. And here's the thing. Talking about stopping, the right-wing extremist shift in this country, we can't do that through a third party, Bernie. Bernie, here's the thing. Bernie could literally rescind his nomination to Joe Biden and give it to Dr. West, whom he has much more agreements with, and push the progressive base to prop up Dr. Cornel West as a challenger. You see what Bernie is doing? Bernie is policy, he's party over policy. He literally has the clout to prop up Dr. West and make the case to elect him. And if he got the progressives to prop up Dr. West as well, that would be massive. But they're more loyal to the Democrats who go against the will of the people. Bernie Sanders and the progressives, they're complicit in the destruction of our nation. They are in the same group as the establishment in the GOP. And this is why I say that Bernie Sanders has abandoned us. Because it's no longer about the policies that would actually change us on a fundamental level. It's actually about just electing another standard issue Democrat. And he can say, well, we have this threat. There's a threat every 4 years, Bernie. Does it really matter? There's a threat every 4 years. And what good is it if the threat that you're warning us about, that you're going all over corporate media about, is the exact same as the guy that you're trying to vouch for? Because Biden and Trump are literally one and the same. The only difference is Biden rhetorically supports people who are marginalized. But when it comes to actual policy, he doesn't support us. So you're really making the case for another Trump. Just one that's less orange. I tell you. So yeah, that's basically what happened with Bernie. And there's a part of me that honestly feels like when it comes to Bernie Sanders, Bernie Sanders has, my question is what he did more just nefarious, or is what Bernie did, is what he did more nefarious, or is he just mistaken? And I actually answer that. Well, I asked these questions in an article that I wrote, and I'm not going to read the article, but I just want to share and show you guys. I wrote the article on Substack, says it's time to move beyond Bernie Sanders. Says Bernie gives a critique to Dr. West while clinging to the Democratic Party. And this just came out. And so if you guys would like to, I can share this in the chat if you guys would like to read this article. But this is just my thoughts. And I kind of go back and forth over whether Bernie is really just, is he nefarious in this, or is he just being manipulated? You know? And let me just read this paragraph. It says, is there something that Dr. West realizes that Senator Sanders doesn't? There's a part of me that's been giving Sanders the side eye for a while and is consistently confirming my suspicions that it's not ignorance that he's operating from. In my view, it appears that he is an agent of controlled opposition on behalf of the Democratic Party in order to keep the status quo in place. The driving force as to why he's engaged in his sheep herding tactic makes me believe something nefarious, but I could be wrong. Or could it be blind loyalty to brainwashing that we will have all been subject to over the course of our lives and by means of corporate media? Is it purposeful with ill intent to make sure we side with the lesser evil? Could Bernie Sanders be the proverbial sultan that is hypnotized by Jafar into doing the bidding of the Democratic establishment? There is a part of me that says be kind that wants to there's a part of me that says to be kind that wants to believe that. So, you know, that's the article, and if you guys would like to read it, you know, I'm not the best writer, but yeah, that's basically my point. So let me copy this, share this into the chat so you guys, I just shared it. So yeah. So now, please make sure to give a like if you have not already. I am going to share, I'm going to go to the chat because, yeah, this was bad. Jeez Louise. All right. So let's go to Rockfin first. All right. So thanks for the tip on Rockfin, Roger. Roger says, Larry was just talking about this. And I deemed you his show. Oh, yeah, Larry Sharp. Yeah. Roger also continues, says, before 2016, the GOP had Fox as their biased media machine. Dems had MSNBC. When Bernie came along, he was expected to use the YouTube indie media machine to push his pro-worker agenda, yet never took advantage, barely appeared on TYT. Clearly a creature of his era growing up in the age of legacy media. He was too busy trying to make appearances on MSNBC, but limited to Ed Schultz plus radio on Tom Hartman and Ed Schultz radio. I remember Ed Schultz. Seeing the U.S. military is the biggest CO2 emitter, then someone should ask Bernie, if you want to prevent climate change, then why do you keep voting to keep Lockheed Martin in business? Please look at the video on the homepage. This is what he's supporting. So let me go here. Oop. Wow, that started immediately. Okay. Let me just take a look here. This is, yeah, basically what he's supporting. Wow. That's what Bernie's supporting. That's from Lockheed Martin. Side story, did you guys know that they actually tried to influence me as a tween into the military industrial complex when I was little? Short little story. So when I was 13, we in our elementary school, in our middle school, I went to a predominantly black middle school. Shout out to Robbinswood Middle School here in Orlando. And so we actually had, I was in a certain class. I forget the class. But in that class, they actually had what they call the mentor program. In the mentor program, you would have people, adults come out and talk to us about our life and try to push us in a more successful direction for those of us who are little kids. I forget my mentor's name. I think it started with a T. But he was a white guy, redhead. He was chill. He was cool. And come to find out, one day we actually had a little field trip. And it was just a small group of us within this mentor program. And where did we go? We went to Lockheed Martin. We went to Lockheed Martin and saw the weapon systems that they were building. Now, there's a Lockheed Martin building. It's a couple miles away from me. It's not that far. I think that's the one we went to. And so we went to that Lockheed Martin and saw the weapon systems for Black Hawk helicopters. I remember seeing them. Yep. And then, because his wife worked at Disney, they took us to Disney World and things like that. Took us out to eat and everything else. But really, we were being groomed by the military industrial complex. Me at 13. So yes, this happens. And they did that. And they do it to kids all the time. Talk to your kids in school because that's what they're doing. Let's continue. Let's give a shout out to CEB Applejack being a member, a JB member for 7 months. Yes. Woo, clap it up for CEB Applejack. Thank you so very much. CEB Applejack says Cornel West for first Black president. He would literally be the first Black president that's a descendant of slaves. He would literally be. Walter's Grape says, it should be against the law to call yourself independent when you ride the Democrats so hard. Yeah. Oh, my goodness. Dwayne says St. Bernard the demagogue. Oh, my goodness. Goodness. Jeez Louise. Cobra Commander says, I missed the MLK Jr. quote from his jail letters. I love that quote. Lukewarm acceptance is far more bewildering than outright rejection. Yeah, that's exactly what Bernie Sanders is doing, right? And so, yeah, it's wild how he's basically abandoned all of us. And some people are saying, well, no, Bernie's all right. Right? And I'm just like, yeah, no. No. You even got people who are telling us to fall in line, you know, who call themselves Marxists and socialists, which is kind of crazy. I wasn't planning on showing this, but just really quick. I'm not going to share the entire thing, but look.
Good afternoon, friends and trolls, and specifically to my left-leaning followers who are always commenting about how they plan on voting third party.
All right, let's see it.
Believe me when I say that I definitely believe that we need more than two choices for our government. But I'm mature enough to know that right now isn't the time for that. 2024 is coming. Get the fuck on board.
Now, where did I hear this particular type of phrase from?
First, I must confess that over the past few years, I have been gravely disappointed with the white moderate. I have almost reached the regrettable conclusion that the Negro's great stumbling block in his stride toward freedom is not the white citizens' counselor or the Ku Klux Klaner, but the white moderate who is more devoted to order than to justice.
So yeah, I did that as well. So yeah, we have to be careful when it comes to telling people who are disenfranchised, who are sick and tired of the two-party system, that we just have to wait a little bit longer. Don't do that. We're tired of waiting. Like James Baldwin said, how long must I wait for your progress? You told my father to wait. You told my uncles to wait. You told my brothers. You told my sister's time, my mama's time. How much do we have to wait? How much longer? We're done waiting. So, yeah. Anywho, so thank you so very much to everybody for tuning in today. Let me check the rock just to make sure I didn't miss anything. Okay, we're good there. So, look, be sure to tune in later this week. I will be also continuing the reading for Asada Shakur's autobiography. I'll be continuing that. I may just give this a read during the hurricane. Yes, we have a hurricane on the way. It should reach landfall by Thursday, sometime Thursday. So I'll have time to read then. I'll just have to open up my window if we have power outage. Also, I'll be continuing the reading of A Lady Season This Does Not Exist by Dr. Devon Price. So we're going to be continuing that if you guys would like to. And thank you so very much for that. If you guys have not, then please leave a like if you guys haven't already. And thank you so very much. I'm trying to be more concise and more structured in my streams so that I'm not all over the place. If you guys have noticed, then I'm trying to be more structured. So please bear with me as I get my bearings straight on this, but I'm just trying to have a better channel for you so that it makes more sense and everything's more clear running through. And yeah, so that's what I'm trying to do. So thank you so very much for bearing with me. And thank you so much for your patience as I get through this. Thank you so very much to all the patrons on Patreon as well as on Coffee. And thank you to everyone who has supported me so far in doing this work. And I appreciate it. If you guys have not already, then of course, you guys can go to jaybefaunt.substack.com in order to get email notifications so that you guys are aware of whenever I go live, as well as any articles that I may write. I'm trying to improve in my writing. So I appreciate all the critiques as well as the support. And if you guys have not already, then I also am raising money for the Mutual Aid Revolutionary Blackout Network Orlando chapter for our houseless neighbors. If you guys like to, you guys can go to Cash App, $Orlando RBN as well. So thank you so very much for everybody tuning in. Look, like I always say, you know, we have to continuously do what we can in order to inform our neighbors so that we can build class consciousness and worker solidarity. Shout out to the UAW workers as well. I cannot wait to see what's on the horizon for them. Express your power so you can get what you deserve. Water your plants, water yourselves, leave the world better than you found them. Oh, I forgot. By the way, before y'all go, oh my goodness, wait, did I have it up here? I have it. I have it. What did I do with it? Where did I put it? Did I put it up here? I didn't put it up there. So just to let you guys know, I got a merch store. I forgot to tell you. Oh my God. Thank God I remembered before I left. So yeah, I actually got a merch store recently. So I can share that with you guys really quick. But yeah, I'm pretty excited about it. I was thinking about, you know, getting one, but I didn't know exactly how I was going to do it, how I was going to roll out. But I got one. So I'm going to share that really quick with you guys before I head out. This is exciting. So if you guys are interested in getting any merch, then I have this as well. It's the Jaybefaunt store. And look, I have ones with my logo on it. But then I also have one with one of my favorite quotes: leave the world better than you found it. So you have mugs, totes, and you have shirts and sweatshirts and pullovers. So yeah, so that's exciting. So I have that as well. And hopefully I can grow in the designs for the merch store too. So yeah, so here is the link if in case anybody's interested. All right, so like I said, leave the world better than you found it. Like I always say, smoke them if you got them, drink them if you got them. If you ain't got them, then watch something funny, watch something hilarious, because joy is revolutionary. And oh, mwah, forehead kisses to every single one of you, because you matter. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise, because guess what? You are important to all of us in this world. And your pain is my pain, and your joy is my joy. And please tell me all your victories so I can celebrate with you, because I love you. Have a great day, everybody. Until next time.